I dreamt a dream, what can it mean? And that I was a maiden queen, guarded by an angel mild. Witless woe was ne'er beguiled, and I wept both night and day, and he wiped my tears away. And I wept both day and night, and hid from him my heart's delight. So he took his wings and fled, then the morn blushed rosy red. I dried my tears and armed my fears, with 10,000 shields and spears. Soon my angel came again. I was armed, he came in vain, for the time of youth was fled, and grey hairs were on my head. William Blake's poem, The Angel. This scene goes on for a while, about 3 minutes to be exact. It is the most normal one in the entire movie as well. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. This movie is called Tenshi no Tamago, or Angel's Egg in English. There's little to no dialogue. That 1 3-minute scene of near stillness is reflective of the entire movie. People call Angel's Egg more moving art rather than an actual film. It should say something when the movie can be better explained in GIFs rather than in words. This, of course, has made it immensely popular on the internet. It's all about the aesthetics, after all. This movie really looks like nothing else. What's the plot? Here's the entire script. That is it. The entire movie has less than about 3 dozen lines of dialogue. Of those 3 dozen lines, 80% are spoken in a 3-minute period. None of them spoil anything. Yes, this is definitely an art house film. When a movie's genre is listed as avant-garde, the viewer is in for something. Especially when it is a somewhat obscure Japanese original video animation from the mid-80s that pretty much sat in obscurity for 2 decades. Angel's Egg is something, but nobody can agree on what exactly. Online, people often bandy about the claim the movie has no meaning. It is just an experimental film with some very obviously intricate animation, which is blatantly wrong. The having no meaning part, I mean. I could not find the film's budget, but for something released directly to VHS, it was probably astronomical. The movie clearly means something, but in a similar sense to how a dream also means something. There are obvious symbols and themes, but they are dependent on personal interpretation. The film's director Mamoru Oshii has openly admitted that the piece was highly influenced by his background in dreams. Despite its current high regard online, Angel's Egg has always been somewhat obscure, even in Japan. So how is Oshii able to make something so out there? OVAs. Mamoru Oshii's name is familiar to most anime enthusiasts for directing Ghost in the Shell and Patlabor, but in 1983, Oshii got his major start writing and directing the sci-fi series Dallos. Dallos was pretty much the first OVA, or original video animation series, a format for animated movies or series to be released directly to home media, mainly to avoid risks stranger projects may have faced at the theater or monetary failure. As is obvious, Tenshi no Tamago was deemed too strange for a wider theatrical run. Though it did receive a limited art house run in Japan, it was released as an OVA on December 15, 1985. It still flopped. By this point, most would assume Angel's Egg never got an official English release. But it did, kind of. I did discover a Spanish dub that I think added a few extra lines of dialogue to the film, but I'm not sure if this is official or just a fan dub.
Por favor, prométeme que no harás daño a mi huevo.
Even my brief searches in Spanish turned up nothing. Still, the Spanish version was far more loyal than the bizarre American live-action recut called In the Aftermath 1988, a version that mixed 30 minutes of animation from Tenshi no Tamago with an original live-action post-apocalyptic plotline. In the Aftermath is worthy of its own discussion, but simply put, it missed the point pretty hard. Angel's Egg had some trouble finding an audience. But it did, about 25 years later. Not to say it did not have fans earlier. By the mid-90s, the movie was pretty popular in English anime circles. The earliest reference I found to it online was from 1998 in England on a pretty hefty fan page. By the early 2000s, unsubbed copies of the film were already in circulation, with a small but established cult following. It was somewhat mythical at that point. Even without dialogue, it was so unexplainable to almost be an urban legend. I do not think it is an exaggeration to claim more people have seen Angel's Egg through YouTube today than through VHS/DVDs and the theatrical release combined. Whoever owns the rights to the movie, if anyone, has never really enforced the copyright online. I doubt it would be worth it anyways. On YouTube, one upload alone has amassed nearly 1 million views alone. Combining all the uploads, the view count easily breaks 1 million, even leaving out foreign language uploads. The YouTube algorithm likely saved the movie from total obscurity in the English-speaking world. There are plenty of comments saying how they just randomly stumbled across the movie and loved it. I just found it one night randomly browsing YouTube. It leaves an impression. What is so good about Angel's Egg? Most first attraction is skin deep. The movie is the product of the two renowned personalities of Mamoru Oshii and Yoshitaka Amano. The hair animation is a somewhat infamous meme about the film. You can see where the budget went. All over the place. That's Oshii, as he described his own work. I enjoy making the world as detailed as possible. I get absorbed in the finer points, like what the back of a bottle label looks like when you see it through the glass. That's very Japanese, I suppose. I want people to go back to the film again and again to pick up on things they missed the first time. Angel's Egg was a very expensive and very risky investment, which failed. Oshii has stated he could not find work for 3 years afterwards, which is true. His next film in 1987 was Red Spectacles, which was live action. As he has said about Tenshi no Tamago, it made him very poor.
Do you think Angel's Egg could be made today?
今この状況の中、天使の卵がもう一度作られることってありますか？
二度と作りたくない。
I would never want to even think about that.
これあれ作って3年間仕事なかったから。
After I made that, nobody gave me jobs for 3 years.
すごく貧乏になったし。
It made me very poor.
でもやっぱり、なんて言うんだろう、かわいそうな娘っていう感じ。
It's kind of like my poor daughter, kind of.
なんとなくうまく世の中に出してあげられなかった。
I wish that she would have been able to be more exposed to the world.
広角機動隊っていうのはなんて言うんだろう、あんまりそんなね期待しないでなんて言うんだろう結婚させて娘みたいな。
Whereas Ghost in a Shell is another daughter who I wasn't expecting to ever get married, but she got married.
なんかやっぱりそうなんて言うんだろう日本語で不憫って言うんだけど不憫。
It's kind of unfortunate.
でももう作りたくない。
But I don't want to make it again.
He's either a tad bit embarrassed by it to this day, or it's just Japanese sensibility. Even if it is his poor daughter, Oshii has stated he would never want to make it again. So what is it about him that made Angel's Egg? Born August 8th, 1951 in Tokyo, Japan, Mamoru Oshii is one of Japan's directors most popular in the West. He's famous for directing both Ghost in the Shell movies, but, as with the Red Spectacles, he's worked in animation and live action. His work from this period has a very obvious style, dark, obscure, and introspective. His style shines through in Angel's Egg, but for Oshii, it is unusually subdued, obscure, religious, and almost Gnostic. It should be noted that before becoming a director, Oshii studied to be a priest at a seminary outside Tokyo. Oshii planned to become a Christian priest, but he had a crisis/failure of faith, dropped out of school, and became a student activist in the 70s. Since then, his relationship with his faith has been complicated, if his interviews are anything to go by. As he has described, "I'm not a Christian, but I've been reading the Bible since my student days. I use it as a prototype, not for religious reasons, but for ideology and literary inspiration." So Christianity has a heavy literary influence upon Oshii's work, especially as relating to humanity. But trying to pin him down as anything is missing the point, I think. In Angel's Egg, this is more than obvious. Oshii's films lend themselves to symbolic analysis, but one should be careful with this. As he stated, "Ruins arise often in my dreams." I would say that's about half of it. Of course, Angel's Egg is not one man's dream alone. Or maybe it is. I'll get to that. There is a reason Angel's Egg looks like an avant-garde fantasy. That is the only way to describe the film. This is largely due to the hand of Yoshitaka Amano. The artist's hand put Oshii's plan and plot to paper and ink. Due to Amano's style, the OVA was made more ephemeral and fairy tale-like. It does look like a dream in both backdrop and design. The character designs, and there are only two really, may look familiar, a young waif character and a boy with a pseudo-sword. That's because Amano was/is one of the main artists behind the Final Fantasy series. He was highly involved in the series up until around 7 or 6, and continues to do the key visuals and titles to this day, and some scenes in this movie look very Final Fantasy. Amano's art becomes more and more abstract in meaning through the entire thing. His distinctive style flows through the entire movie. Most of it feels more like a moving painting by Amano rather than a movie. The dialogue is minimal, but Amano's art does more than enough in conveying Oshii's plot. Amano's fingerprints are all over it. Pale-skinned characters, gothic cities and towers, bizarre weapons, if those are weapons. So you have a renowned director and an acclaimed artist working on a movie prior to their respective big breaks in the late 80s. It is no surprise Angel's Egg is popular. It has a high level of cross-community and cultural appeal. The modern internet environment is hyper-aware of this. But where did Angel's Egg come from? Beside Oshii and Amano's heads, and investors' wallets, Oshii revealed the OVA's origins in an interview in a magazine called Image back in 1985. According to Oshii in an interview, Tenshi no Tamago started out as, I kid you not, a Lupin III movie. You know, this monkey-faced fellow. But it gets stranger than that. Oshii described the plot of his prototype Lupin movie that evolved into Angel's Egg. Oshii: the girl in Lupin lives in a strange tower, which appeared in the middle of 20th century Tokyo. The one who created the tower was an old architect who surpassed Moses and Gaudi, the architect, and the girl is his granddaughter. The old architect once had 12 disciples and she is served by the remaining 4. It seems she spends her life in a wheelchair without taking one step out of her room. A murder takes place in this tower and photographic evidence shows the white hands of a young girl. Lupin decides to tackle this mystery and sneaks into the tower. As he advances towards the interior, he discovers white feathers scattered on the ground and the corpses of small animals. According to Fujiko's investigation, it turns out the girl wasn't the old architect's granddaughter. Then who in the world was she? She was actually an angel who mocked humans and killed them. In my mind, the tower itself was based on Dante's Inferno, while the strange girl was Beatrice. It is pretty obvious why Oshii's Lupin adaptation was unfortunately cancelled. During the mid-80s, Lupin was still in the family-friendly phase. Lupin III Part 3/Pink Jacket was intended to be far more humorous and slapstick-based to some degree. Not that Lupin had not tackled hard themes before, or Oshii could not do action comedy, but Oshii's Lupin clearly emerged at the wrong time. The then current Lupin was nowhere near Oshii's planned interpretation, which was far too large to begin with. For a comparison, here's Lupin. And here's Angel's Egg.
魚?
どこにもいないのに追いかけたって魚なんかどこにもいないのに
Lupin. And Angel's Egg.
大地から生気を吸い上げて脈打つ枝を伸ばし何かを掴んでいた。
Surprisingly, there were 2 pretty interesting promotional pieces produced for Oshii's project, what looked to be posters, but nothing more materialized from it. But both were also drawn by Amano. Oshii and Amano then likely first met on this project, and, after it was canned, they went on to produce Angel's Egg together. So the legendary Mamoru Oshii Lupin film is as lost can get. What is interesting is Angel's Egg's origins can already be detected in Oshii's rough plot. The girl, the tower, the feathers, and the tangible Christian symbolism. Oshii even openly admitting the tower was a metaphor for Dante's Inferno, and the girl is a figure similar to Beatrice, which she may or may not also be in Tenshi no Tamago. Keep that all in mind when examining Angel's Egg. Oshii is very aware of his work. The movie can be considered both an analysis in his own failure and faith, and also a metaphor for the cancellation of his Lupin project, an artist pouring all his angst and disappointment into a new work. The OVA feels very much like the catharsis of Oshii's early career. To begin with Angel's Egg, one has to examine the characters. There's only 2, maybe 3. The girl and the boy, for lack of better names, are the most substantial parts of the film. Starting with the girl, she can be considered the film's main character, for lack of a better term. She has the most screen time, she has no name, may not even be human, lives alone in a big tower, sound familiar, scavenges food from the empty city, drinks water, a lot of water, and has an egg she is very protective of. Anything else is open to interpretation. Most will focus upon the egg first. What does it mean? Faith, spirit, trust, maturity, and immaturity? A symbol in any form. In my reading, and this is my reading, she represents faith or innocence. Angel's Egg is akin to the English poet William Blake's work. It establishes its own mythology atop the Christian mythos. The girl is very reflective of Blake's poem, The Little Lost Girl, a similar tale of a girl lost in a wasteland, alone, spiritually or physically young, but unharmed. The egg is her symbol of faith or promise she carries with her by pure hope. It is clear sin and innocence feature heavily in the film. The boy, or warrior, or wanderer, or whatever one may call him, is a bit more complicated. He's clearly the girl's antithesis, but shares her symbols of faith. Most take him to be a metaphor for Jesus, or a savior, or a destroyer. The plot is mainly fulfilled through his entrance and action. He literally rides into the story on a war machine. Or maybe it is supposed to be like Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. His role is to either bring faith to its fulfillment, or destroy it. That's why Angel's Egg is hard to get a read on. All he does, at first, is follow the girl around. Well, that's not true. He does one other thing at the climax of the movie. He's looking for a bird, one he saw a long time ago. The bird might also mean faith. The boy has no direct parallel in Blake's poetry, but he has plenty in religion. He shows all the signs of being a prophet of some kind, even if he is not Jesus. Some readings of the film even base his first appearance, standing upon the weaponry, as being the inheritor of ancient faith and bloodshed. He probably represents maturity or spiritual experience in general. Unlike the girl, he has suffered wounds in war, literal or metaphorical, that have jaded him of faith in the world and matured him. This too is represented by his object, or if you want to get Freudian, fetish, his cross, a gun or staff of some kind. He never uses it, except for one moment, but everyone who analyzes this film does. Is it his burden? Is it the actual cross? If the egg is life, is the cross death? Is it phallic? It definitely looks like a weapon. What about the bandages on his hand? Are those the stigmata, the wounds where Jesus was pierced on the cross? Or are they just wounds from some battle? Maybe they are simply Amano's artistic flourish. He does look a bit like Cloud. If he is Jesus, has he come to fulfill some prophecy? Or he might just not be real. The boy could simply be part of the girl's dreams or delusions. One track in the OST is literally titled Egg's Dream, so keep that in mind. The eventuality of having to abandon childish naivety and hatch out of the shell. That is an option too. Take your pick. There's technically a third character as well, sort of, beside those shadow fishermen, but we'll get to those. The world itself is also a character. The water mostly. A majority of the plot is told through liquid, either how it reflects, distorts, or destroys. There's also this thing. It may be God. God isn't God the Father. One of the songs of the movie sort of gives it the name Mechanical Sun, or a different God. The boy has some relationship to it. It also submerges itself in water at the start of the film. The collection of statues upon it are reminiscent of choirs of angels and the circles of paradise in the Divine Comedy, rings surrounding the soul, or soul son of God. The issue is if one takes it to be good, bad, or something else. It does look artificial in some way. If bad, it is the Gnostic demiurge god that creates the world to destroy or consume it. If good, it is God sending down his son and spirit, through the water and the boy, to save what remains of the world. The issue is there is nobody left to save, seemingly, beside the girl who's obsessed with her egg. There's also the water itself. As the movie invokes Noah's Ark, the in-story understanding and meaning of water, rain, and floods is obviously biblical. The water then may represent the Holy Spirit, God's power or action in the world, or it may also be his wrath. This would complete the Christian trinity of the mechanical sun, the boy, and water. Or maybe the girl, or egg, or dove is the third part of the trinity, but, as in the Bible, God sent down the floods to cleanse the world, so it both saves and destroys the earth. The interpretation is once more up to the viewer. Is the boy trying to save the world, destroy it, or is he chasing some part of himself? Is it all one big metaphor? What is the actual plot? What? The plot? Angel's Egg is easier to interpret rather than describe. The bizarre imagery is more impactful than the minimal dialogue. It is a tale old as time. Giant sphere descends into the sea. Boy meets girl. Girl runs from boy. Boy and girl encounter fishermen hunting shadow coelacanth fish. This probably means something. Girl and boy return to girl's giant tower. Girl shows boy a bird. That's not a bird. They then talk about the egg. Girl goes to sleep. Then, well, that is spoiler territory. Hold on for that. There is more than enough already. This is the best anyone can do describing what happens on the screen, though there are some missing details, like this. I do not know what this is. A bird? An angel? Use your imagination. Talking about Angel's Egg is taking a gamble. My reading is heavily colored by Oshii's background and reading his interviews. It is going to derive from his faith and literary background. Just consider that with this and other interpretations. There's always some bias. I see Angel's Egg, like most, as some statement on faith and spiritual development and failure. Is it fulfillment of faith? This idea is more based off the imagery rather than Oshii's background and statements on the film. Is it failure of faith? By his words, the film was partially a product of Oshii's own troubled spirit and the cancellation of the Lupin project. Is that why Angel's Egg is so weird? Beside being created by Mamoru Oshii and Yoshitaka Amano, there is very little dialogue. The best way to describe Angel's Egg's disposition towards the verbal is silence is golden, or the Japanese term chinmoku. Chinmoku, in the barest sense, is a Japanese cultural concept of indirect communication, or silence. Some things can only be said without being spoken. This avoids conflict and misunderstanding. Silence speaks louder than words in society, but not at the box office. The movie's entire story is based upon the lack of dialogue, which focuses upon the design and cinematography. Angel's Egg's popularity is due to the compelling nature. Oshii was heavily inspired by Western cinematography, and Amano by Western art. Angel's Egg shows this. Tenshi no Tamago straddles the line between both cultures. Western imagery applied to Eastern style, Christian symbolism paired with Japanese ethos. As Oshii stated, the movie was him interpreting his own dreams. It is as close visually as one can get to seeing another's dream. The inner symbols are known only to the dreamer. He is not sure what they mean either, but Oshii summed it up with this very esoteric explanation. Ruins. I like ruins. I like museums. I like fish. I like birds. I like water. And I like girls. Laughs. I really liked the Bible as a little boy. While a student, I planned to enter seminary at one point, but didn't. Even now, though, I still read the Bible sometimes. So if the director is not sure who is, why clearly it must be the guy who wrote a 10-page script on this movie. Time for a multi-layered esoteric pseudo-Christian interpretation of Angel's Egg. Angel's Egg is a pretty fluid movie, very literally, so I'll start with Emanuel Swedenborg's Spiritus Fluid. Water is everywhere in the film, owing to Oshii's obsession with fish, but no fish ever actually appear in the water, only in shadows. Owing to the fact that waters are God's wrath? Maybe. The water to some degree is equated with the waters of baptism and the symbol of Christ's blood. The Christian mystic Emanuel Swedenborg identified the blood of the body, or spiritus fluid, as one of the major aspects of the spirit. While Swedenborg's spiritual system is far more complex, blood, to him, holds all wisdom of the spirit, and being as an animating substance. It is important to note, Swedenborg was highly interested in how faith, religion, and God related to the living individual. He was one of the first major religious figures to contemplate the existence of life on other planets and the possible implications. Swedenborg's God was an infinite, uncountable being that ruled the entire universe, a description that possibly echoes in the mechanical sun god in Angel's Egg. Swedenborg saw other worlds inhabited by other spirits, similar to how that different god first enters the waters, then leaves. The water, or spiritus fluid, he sends washing over the boy, just as God sends the Holy Spirit over men in the Christian religion. The water's identity in the movie is far more complicated than first thought. It is this god, or creature, reaching out to preserve or destroy. Here I return to my meager Blakean interpretation of the film's characters. This too could be flawed, but the girl and boy may represent the basic spiritual states of humanity, if they are even human. It too is never clearly stated what is supposed to be in the egg. It might be a bird, but in the film it is not clear what a bird is, even if it is not in the egg. Holding on to the egg as a symbol of faith then, literally, the girl represents William Blake's state of spiritual innocence, a spiritual naivety and purity Blake saw in children. Like the lost girl or queen guarded by the angel in his poetry, the girl is spiritually pure and untainted by disappointment, a state similar to man's primal innocence. Or she may in fact be the angel of the movie. As stated, it is impossible to say if either of these characters are even human. One will notice the contrast between the girl's unearthly white skin and the boy's more human skin tone. Moving on to his role then, he represents some form of spiritual maturity in contrast to the girl's innocence. Maturity here is not explicitly good though, representative of Blake's state of experience, a phase where humans understand sin and embarrassment as they grow. Unlike the girl's faith in the organic, rounded egg, the boy holds the pointed artificial gun or cross. If it is a gun, it represents the act of killing, thus a fallen worldly state. If it is a cross, it represents having to take on others' sins and failures as his own burden. Still, as a soldier, he seems to protect the girl at first. Could he be her guardian angel? Guarding her, but then having to force her to face the reality of the world, moving her from innocence to experience. So why does the movie not outright say anything? It is purposefully obtuse. The point is to challenge the viewer. Much of Angel's Egg is about testing the viewer. It is avant-garde, after all. That is why it has a rabid cult following. That and the gifts. It is up to the viewer to understand and discuss it. Following Shinmoku, much of the conflict is unspoken and implied. Tension between the girl and boy, the characters and the fisherman, the water and the world. Most of it seems to follow Soren Kierkegaard's belief of the individual spirit versus the group, or that the group is untruth. True faith arises only from the person, as when the girl and boy pass by the shadow fisherman. They are the only two aware of the world beyond the fish. The strange soldiers are aware only of the false shadow images, and not the city or chapel. They are not fishers of men. The encounter between the boy and girl creates a transformation of faith, which leads to the movie's conclusion. Kierkegaard believed, in line with Socrates, one must challenge to draw out information. Not everything known is good or true. So too was Kierkegaard also interested in the idealization of the spirit and God. He believed women were spiritually purer than men, but men had to struggle for true faith. This may have something to do with the statues at the end, but let's talk about the end then. The end to Angel's Egg is even more bizarre than the rest of the movie. It seems to reflect the journey from innocence to experience, immaturity to maturity, purity to sin, and either fulfillment or failure of faith. The boy breaks the girl's egg with his cross. It turns out to be empty. Maybe. She runs after him, then falls. As she falls into the water, she appears to age as she drowns. Then thousands of eggs pop up in the water, seemingly from her death, if it is a death. The soundtrack seems to call this phase transmigration. They then become these weird bird stalks. That is also a maybe. But then the mechanical sun rises out of the water. On a shore filled with feathers, the boy watches the mechanical god. The girl is now a stone statue upon it with the egg. It ascends to space and the viewer can see the entire world is drowned, and the only land that remains seems to be the remains of Noah's Ark. Makes sense? That is what I thought. The girl's death clearly represents growth in spirit, but it is not made clear if it is pessimistic or optimistic. What about the eggs, though? Is that an outpouring of her faith, or just more meaningless symbolism? The eggs could be just as empty as hers was. Or they could grow into more angels. Whatever these giant birds are supposed to be. Are these even angels? Was the girl an angel, or the last survivor of Noah's Ark? The world we see is clearly flooded in line with the boy's earlier parable, a world that never progressed beyond the flood as the dove never returned. Or did it actually find land? The boy does find feathers on the beachhead. Is he the Jesus of this empty, flooded world? He is alone in the end. Perhaps him and the world is just part of a dream. What about the statues? Are those other souls or spirits? Remember, in his Lupin movie, Oshii said the tower was supposed to be a metaphor for Dante's Inferno. The statues could be the idealized, innocent spirits of the faithful, saints in some odd variety of heaven, or eternal souls trapped. If the ending is interpreted as good, God has saved what remained of the flooded world. Maybe. If the ending is bad, God has flooded humanity and destroyed any trace of faith. If this thing is even supposed to be God, it has failed in its goal. As said, any interpretation of the movie runs on personal opinion. As Mamoru Oshii has stated, "I'm not a Christian. I like the ideology." So he does not think the movie lacks meaning, but its truth is obscure even to him. There does seem to be some metaphor of growth and survival within it. At least for humans, the world the viewer witnesses is utterly destroyed. In a negation and affirmation of faith, the director has even stated, "Ultimately, I think I'm an optimist, although all my movies have a dark aspect. I think humans are, by all means, no good. They need to change, they need to accept that they are no good, and they need to accept the fact that they need to move on. So, in that sense, I am very positive in the terms of humans having to change in order to survive." So it's about humanity in the end? Angel's Egg's main question seems to be, what even is an angel? Is it the little girl, pure and innocent? Is it the boy, stoic and avenging? Is it the skeleton, a humanoid with wings? Is it these things? Or is it the bird the boy is chasing, the dove released from the ark which, in this world, never returned to Noah? It died or still wanders the seas. The summation of this clearly occurs with the boy and the feathers on the shore at the end. Are they the down of a newborn bird/angel, or the remains of a dead one? One that drowned at sea, or one just flown from its tree? Or do they mean nothing, the empty symbolism of a dream? Basically a Rorschach test of faith. The entire tale may be that. A dream or Rorschach test of belief, both more and less bizarre than thought. I can only say what I think the movie is. I'd love to hear other interpretations. Other people have different tools and means of analysis. I can only showcase what mine have produced. People do not learn by heralding one theory alone and unquestioning. I am interested to see what others see in the windswept feathers or murky pool that is Tenshi no Tamago. It is interesting how a pretty obscure failure of an OVA from 25 years ago can achieve popularity online thanks to YouTube. This has led to a plethora of readings and very interesting comments on it. It is more popular than it ever was pre-internet. That is neither a good or a bad thing, just an interesting observation. Oshii, though, has described himself as an optimist, whatever that means in this case. He always makes sure to have some affirming message no matter how bleak the results. His opinion on his own work, he does not know what people want to see, but he knows what he wants to see. I'm happier if 10,000 people see the film 10 times each than if 1 million people see it once. I'm not making it for the general public, but for a core group of fans. I hope it will make a big impression on them. If I can do that, I'm happy. So, he's an optimist in his own regards.